I've gotten about 7 new subscribers since Paul talked about my Kayfabe video on his channel. And since the people are here for the Kayfabe action, I thought I would pass on my good fortune by sharing a clip from Chris Howard's channel, because he doesn't have very many subscribers, but he's been live streaming almost every day in the morning, and he does some fun stuff going over the different things that he's watched and giving some opinions. And usually the link is there to chat if people are interested. So I was able to go on there when he was talking about my most recent video that he watched, and he had some interesting things. I went back and listened, but we got to have a nice talk, and I got to add some of the points that I think were missing. So it was the thing that commonly happens where you get to have conversation and you get greater clarity and more insight into these topics. So I'm going to put that, and then I will share some additional thoughts at the end after I share that conversation between him and Tunji and myself.
I watched this Michael Satori thing this morning. Cobra Kai is not just fiction, it's kayfabe with training wheels. I'm not sure what connection is between. Well, I assume that this is actually just a show, that they're reading from a script or whatever, and that they don't stay in this character outside of the filming. But I haven't watched the show, so maybe I'm not understanding right, because I was thinking it was just an extension of the movie, so it's movie land, not real life land, which is a bizarre thing to say. But anyway, so I'm not sure I'm following all of where he's taking me with his kayfabe stuff. The first one I really liked. The first one made a lot of sense to me, and also he explained why they're doing it, which was really, I found, very helpful. And that was the explanation he gave, or at least what I came away from it with, was that it's an athletic endeavor, and it involves things that can overstress or hurt the athlete. And so it's an enactment of their athletic prowess, not an exercise so much. Now, I'm sure there's some athletic prowess involved. You can't just lift people up and throw them around without some athletic prowess. But if they had to do the actual all-out event over and over, they would be harmed. And that makes sense, because we see that with boxing or things like that, where you can't be at your peak all the time, and it's a situation where you're going to wear yourself out. So if they were to box but not actually hit each other, then that would be kind of a kayfabe, and I'm not sure I would buy it, but it makes some sense, because you're landing points. Well, how about fencing? So you have protective gear, and you have points indicators, and so instead of actually stabbing the guy in the chest, you're getting points without the danger. So anyway, that part of the explanation of why they're doing the kayfabe, that was very helpful to me. But they didn't go with the fencing solution, and maybe that was because the technology was not up to it. So they went with kind of a reenactment solution. So it's like the Civil War reenactors. They don't actually shoot at each other, but some certain number of them fall down on the field as if they were shot, and you get the at least a little bit of the flavor of what happened at the actual event. Anyway, yeah, that was well worth watching. Oh, here we got Michael Sartori. Oh, the author himself. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Just figured to come in and say hello.
Well, that
So
was you. I was talking about your kayfabe thing a little bit.
Oh, okay. What do you think about it? I didn't. I'll have to go back and listen to what you said, I guess. But
Oh, well, it doesn't matter an awful lot. The first step, I followed the first one really well, and I liked the explanation of why they came up with it because of the physical challenges of an impossibility of reproducing dangerous athletic endeavor, night after night, show after show. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Otherwise, it would be like boxing where they can only do it every 6 months, and
Yeah.
after a couple of years they don't know their name anymore, that kind of a thing. And even then, I'm sure boxing has its days when you're working really hard and days where you're not working really hard. So that made perfect sense. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense why they do that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what the second one was about.
Well, the second one was I talked about how Jon Stewart he did the similar thing. Did you? I don't know. I had put clips in, but then YouTube made me take them out for the video to show. But it's worth watching his thing just because you get a very different perspective on it. But
yeah, and this word has been coming up all over the place.
Yeah.
And it appears to attach itself to Trump. People think this is a thing a technique that he uses, and it makes some sense that might be the case. So, but it is kind of attached to him. And then the last one, which I watched this morning, and I like all of them, so I'm not saying I didn't like it, but it's getting a little bit farther out. And you were talking about the Cobra Kai, which I have never seen. And
yeah, but yeah,
so
it
kind of lost me in the difference between kayfabe and like just acting. Do they all go off script, or is it pretty much, is that show a scripted thing? Or
no, that's a scripted thing. I mean, there really isn't a lot of difference. I mean, I think the thing is, with like wrestling, what people get caught up about is they get caught up about how like the in-ring performance is essentially, it's not necessarily scripted like move for move, but the outcome's been determined. They have a basic idea of what's going to happen and all that, and so then that kind of gets people really upset about it. But it because people are thinking about it from the perspective of athletic competition, but it really is drama. It's a drama where they're more or less bringing this semi-realistic, or I mean, it is a realistic fight. Then there's certainly there's a genuine athleticism that's going on there, even though they've kind of
oh yeah, I mean, I couldn't even climb up on the corner post and jump down without hurting myself. So yes, there is, or picking each other up. Some 250-pound man and then picking each other up, and
So I think, and this is something I actually didn't put it in the video because it was kind of the missing piece that clicked. It's kind of the thing what Paul's always talking about. You make the video so you can kind of figure out what your thoughts are. But the thing that kind of clicked between those two is that the fighting, the aspect that there is a fight, is that's supposed to be the mechanism that gives you the decisive conclusion or whatever. Well, who wins? The person, and you know who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, and so there's sort of this feeling where maybe the bad guy wins sometimes, but the fuller story is not over until the good guy wins, and that's like the completion of kind of maybe an arc of a story.
Yeah, now you're reminding me too, that was in your very first video about it, was the serialization, the lengthening of the story past one event. Yeah, and that was important, and I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and obviously this, like if you followed WWE, it's been going on in perpetuity for 50 years or whatever.
Right.
But, there is these certain eras of, it might be a 1 year, 2, 3 year kind of arc of a story. And then maybe that kind of gets boring after a while. And so then you have some good guys that turn into bad guys, or you have new people coming in all the time. So that kind of introduces these new elements. But there are kind of complete story arcs within that,
Right.
which is kind of just
Right.
how life is. So
Yeah. And the assignment of roles and things like that, it really is kind of complicated.
yeah,
You had me thinking of another thing about the scripting a little bit, and that is like the more well, like you get something like a Jackie Chan fight where the movements I would think would have to be extremely orchestrated because
yeah.
they're moving so fast that there really isn't much space for a lot of ad lib things. Good morning, Tunji.
So yeah, and so the thing that I had thought about, the part that I didn't put in the video that really clicked with Cobra Kai is that, it's a regular TV show, but it's sort of this ridiculous thing in that the storylines are having to do with all the things in people's life, all sorts of conflicts, romance,
Uh-huh.
whatever. But conveniently, there's always a karate tournament where people can settle their differences by
Oh, okay.
going into a ring and having a fight. And so in that way, it's kind of the same as wrestling, because I mean I almost think that is the thing that's so appealing is it's like, because wouldn't it just be so great if you could just duke it out with the bad guy, or if that was how things actually were settled. But very rarely does that settle things in real
That's an
life.
interesting point. Yeah. So then there's like a tournament
Yeah,
or yeah, that's a very interesting point.
I have a question, Michael. It was a very good video. I think I appreciate again Cobra Kai I saw some times ago.
yeah,
It was he had the right amount of levity and action and nostalgia. I understood your point about the kayfabe with the training wheels,
yeah,
and I think that has to do with the way that the show invite you to suspend your disbelief.
yeah,
When
yeah.
when the
It's
thing
it's not it's closer to regular TV, even though it's a little bit more ridiculous than most TV. So yeah, people are used to suspending their belief in that medium a bit more.
And on that point, I have a question. How does it translate with real life, with politics? Because, okay, we got the part that people are playing their roles, but
Yeah,
there is also this aspect of I think that they are expecting us that we believe that their argument that they're having are the moment where the things are resolved or settled, or maybe they even showing us that they are talking and they are changing their mind or being convinced of the opposition argument and then coming to a compromise, when in reality maybe all those things happen behind the other doors that are closed, and there are more or less well, uglier kind of deals being done behind the scene.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that probably the most important thing for people to realize in real life is be aware of the fact of how you're interacting with this stuff. Like, are you really just treating it like entertainment in a way, or like, because if the political machine can satisfy you, or keep you engaged just with the screen by what they're presenting, then they are free to do whatever they want that's off script, essentially. And it, and it's just, that's how they're controlling people or whatever, I guess you could say. So I mean, in one sense, it's just, realize that this is kind of, you're seeing something that is, the way it's presented is meant to rile you up or whatever. So maybe if if people pay more attention, I think you can see, because we have different media, and so you say like, oh, well, the mainstream media has really lost the attention of the people, but people are turning into these alternatives. And the effect of that is that the people in power understand, oh, most people are more aligned with the desires and the story or whatever that this new upcoming media is pitching. So they've lost the attention with the other one. And so then they have to choose, like, okay, well, are we going to, reshape the events of the political field to kind of meet people's expectations? And I think that's probably like, and I would say they probably are always trying to figure out the way to make people satisfied without having to give up the things that they actually care about most, enriching themselves personally or whatever. But they know that they have to keep the people satisfied to some extent or whatever. And so I think leveraging that power is something that is possible. And if more of the people were more aware of it, we could probably do it in a better way. But yeah,
I see. The one problem with reality is that there are two levels to the pretending, the kayfabe. One is the consensus machine, so everything is done to get the consensus, and even you have controlled opposition sometimes, all to feed the machine of democracy, or so-called democracy, to be more negative, so that you have always you have power with the appearance of consent of the public.
Yeah.
But the other problem is, though, that we cannot pay attention to things that we do not see. We can only pay attention to what is shown to us through media or otherwise. So anything that is truly behind that fourth wall is there is nothing for us but speculation. We can just speculate or come up with conspiracy of what's going on. So the possibility of deception is stronger than ever.
Well, I think that there is a solution to that. I mean, so I think if you realize that the news is entertainment and not really news, then maybe that should moderate your consumption of it, which means maybe people would become more involved in real life and what's going on. And I think, and if you want to just think about like the whole political thing, there's obviously a scaling thing. So, I mean, I live in a pretty big city, so there is there's a political machine that's in place. But like my father-in-law, he lives in a small town in South Carolina, and for at some point, one of his friends said, hey, you should run for city council or whatever, and he did, and he won, and he got in there just as he's a normal person, and his platform was something about like people were parking on their lawns and wanted to have people stop parking cars on their lawns, or that might have been why he didn't get reelected, because that wasn't popular, or I don't remember what it was, but so you can find out like, okay, well, at least in the scale of my town, I know that things are real, or that like the fake parts of it, what they are, that it's like, yeah, we have to keep this certain person happy because they're rich and they have influence, whatever. So stuff like that. And so it's all it's understandable to a certain extent. And I think that if that becomes less of a mystery, then the higher levels could become more transparent. Because I think that's here in United States, at least, we have this founding of the nation, and I don't think there was a lot of secret stuff going on behind closed doors at the beginning. That's something that kind of creeps in over time as the government grows and all that. So I think that the return to that kind of transparency is possible, but it's also just so much tied to the media environment that didn't exist when the country was founded. Then all they had was newspapers, essentially. So
yeah, I don't know if everybody would agree with the foundation part to be nothing secretive going behind.
Yeah,
but I see the point about the scaling of the system that create more potential for hiding.
It seems like too in politics there's always the undercurrent of competition, and that we have like whistleblowers and things like that where it's difficult to keep information completely encapsulated. And that seems like that would be one way to kind of crack it open a little bit, is to have more channels and more competition and people that are motivated to dig up things.
Yeah. And then that, that's why I think probably with serious corruption, there always is this kind of blackmail element, and that's a more powerful enforcer for keeping people quiet. And so that's the thing where you'd think, like in wrestling, there's a little bit of a pressure to not spill the secrets, but there's not like enforcement on that level. But it's more just of like, this isn't going to be good for your career. This is not going to be good for your livelihood. But even now it's funny because now it's a completely open secret. And there's actually a guy who was in the WWE for I don't know, maybe 10 years or a little less or something like that, and he's got a YouTube channel, and he basically I started watching it. He kind of just makes videos explaining all of what's going on, the behind the scenes and how everything works. And I saw something where essentially he has the blessing of like the WWE to spill the beans. So like, they don't mind the secrets being spilled, but they do like having somebody who is preferred ambassador for the brand doing it, so
yeah, like the approved reviewer or critics for movies and music.
What is that? There's a religious concept about the hidden information. If you're in the group, you're given the hidden information. And so
the Gnostic, that's the Gnostic.
Right. Thing. So this is a form of Gnosticism in the wrestling. By watching his channel, you will be initiated into the top secret things really going on. And that's always really attractive.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be in.
Yeah.
At least have the illusion of being in the inside group. Yeah.
Well, you just talked about we don't know what's going on behind the fourth wall, and so now you're getting a peek, and like in politics where you invited to the White House and sit down and have a talk with the president. who knows if that's even useful, but people will pay lots of money to get in, even just an opportunity to do that. So there's a real attraction for that.
Yeah, or having the press conference in the Oval Office with all the journalists' free questions.
Yeah.
Signing the whatever the decree is there in front of everybody and having guests. It's like, look, we are inside. We are seeing how the sausage is made.
The other thing I thought of, Michael, I wanted to ask you about was, what do you think of how much of the kayfabe is, well, that's not the right question. What do you think of the transition from real life? Wrestling was a real life event. You'd go to an arena and they would do it. And it was kind of a vaudeville-ish kind of thing. And they expand their gestures, they do a big move and then they march around the ring, and it's like, and then so it's not like watching high school boys wrestling where it's all happening in a real small spot and you kind of have to know what you're seeing. But then in television, it kind of takes on even a kind of a different thing than in real life. But they still have the crowd. They do, right? They still have crowds. Yeah. And so the difference between seeing it in real life, I don't know. Have you thought that there's any motivator for the kayfabe or difference in the experience between those two things?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I think its popularity has gone up, and there is even been a kind of resurgence of independent wrestling promotions and things like that. And I think that most of the TV popularity has driven people to want to go to the live events if they can.
See it, yeah.
And then they know you have a job to cheer and to boo. Because that's
okay. Audience participation. Okay.
Yeah, because and if you're in the televised performance, then you are a real person, and your cheering and booing is going to set the tone for everybody watching it on TV, because that's it is the in not in the ring, but in the arena of where it's happening,
right,
that gets televised. And so that was even what the guy that came on Paul's channel, Guy, the wrestler, who kind of that's when I started looking back into this thing, and that he was talking about at the time. What's happened was essentially that there was a champion that the company wanted. They put their time and energy behind him, and the people wanted somebody else, and the people made their voices heard. And eventually the writers had to figure out, how do we give the people what we want? So they had to make a storyline to make the whole thing plausible, but that was a organic response to the will of the people. They because they were basically, they were the guy that was supposed to be a good guy. They just didn't like him, so they would just boo him all the time. And then we don't stop.
Not what they wanted.
Saying, stop telling us that this guy is the hero. Stop trying to push him on us. We don't want him. And then that so I mean that's the thing with the political event and stuff. When people think it's all fake and it's all rigged, well, then they don't really. You may have only a very small amount of influence over anything, but when you start talking that way and thinking that way, you've given up whatever power you had, or all you're doing is you're giving the power to the people in control, and your negativity is probably convincing other people to do it as well. So
this is really complicated. There's a lot of things going on. Now you have me thinking about sitcoms and things where they have, they used to have I Love Lucy or something, and they'll say recorded in front of a studio audience, and they would laugh and things, but there was probably an applause sign, saying applaud now kind of a thing. And there's all sorts of layers and all sorts of things that could be happening.
Well, I wonder, that's even the thing, they know if, because who knows how many sitcom pilots were taped, and then there wasn't enough laughs, and so the show didn't get
picked up or
Right.
whatever. So
Right.
the audience does have a power that more than they often realize. But we're probably not discerning enough with what we do with that power. We sell
Yeah.
ourselves too short.
Well, and it's a collective power too. There might be somebody who's really clapping excitedly, but that's not enough.
Yeah. Well, I got to get to doing some work here, but
Okay.
it was
All right.
good to
Nice to
jump
see
on.
you.
Yeah.
Nice to talk to you. And I think we'll just finish up. We've had a good long talk, and hope you guys have a good day. I'm going to charge in there and get my work done. Maybe on Friday. I always like it on Friday if I can kind of like wrap up the week, kind of finish something up. So that'll be fun.
All right.
I'll see you later.
Very good.
So I had a few more thoughts that I wanted to add in regards to these different but similar kind of things to professional wrestling or to kayfabe. So, and I made the point with Cobra Kai, and Chris brought up fencing, and fencing is a different kind of similarity because it's the skill without the damage, but it doesn't have the appearance of violence. It has a peaceful appearance. And then I thought a similar thing to that would be kind of like paintball, paintball for Jesus, where you can see what would have occurred had you been using live ammunition, and it would have been very devastating, but it's only mildly painful instead. So that's fulfilling a similar sort of role. And then I thought of a couple other things that were also, there's like a Venn diagram. If you put wrestling in the center, there's a lot of things that are overlapping it in different ways. So another one of them, I thought similar to those. So like with the karate thing, you have that element of you can do it in the tournament and it's points like fencing, or you can use it to really hurt people in real life. And it's a either or, it gives you that option of how are you going to settle your disputes, through might or through a mutual respect and competition. And what I brought to mind was I've been reading Parzival, and I think a lot of these Arthurian legends, they had the joust or duels and jousting, where a lot of these decisive decisions are made through a non-lethal form of single combat. And you even, in a sense, have something like that in the Bible with the story of David and Goliath. It's this thing where you have representational combat that's taking place, and it's not just the one winner and the one loser, but it's the effects carry on for everybody else. So those are all sort of similar: fencing, paintball, jousting, and duels. Then when Paul was talking about my video, in his video, the thought that came to mind was about Peterson talking about the rats, and there's the play aspect of it. So there's one aspect where something like wrestling could be done to test strength, test skill without causing damage. But then there's also a play element of it, and with the rats, what Peterson reports, was that Yag Pensov is the guy that did their experiments, but 30% of the time, the big rat needs to lose. And he doesn't lose because he suddenly got worse. He does it willingly as part of the play. And so there's a real kayfabe element in that he's basically pretending to lose by letting the smaller rat win so that their relationship can continue. Which, when you think about that occurring in nature and in the world of animals, it puts a different spin on our reservations about things being fake. And then the other example I wanted to bring up, because this is a very similar to the whole performance aspect of it, very similar dynamic to professional wrestling, is sleight of hand magic shows. and this is something where everybody knows that what is happening is not really happening, but we applaud the ability and the skill of the person to make it appear that way. Even though we know they're only making it appear a certain way and they're not actually doing it, we enjoy that experience. And in some sense, we enjoy the mystery of wondering, how did they do that? And so with wrestling, the mystery is a little bit of, how do they make it look real? And they've gotten a lot better at making it look real since when I started watching it as a kid. I have to say, I've been pretty impressed since I began watching it again. And to find that out, I would recommend people check out Maven Huffman's channel. That was the channel I was talking about in the little discussion, and I'll put the link there. And he's got a lot of entertaining videos and a lot of insider knowledge, and he shows you some of the secrets, and he talks about all sorts of stuff that's like pretty raw, like steroid use and how they did it and how they got away with it, and all the ways they would make blood appear, which is real blood, but they would hide razor blades and things, and all the stuff that goes into it to put on a good show, and the dedication to the craft. It's pretty interesting. So you can check that channel out, and for sure subscribe to Chris Howard's channel and look for his live streams in the morning. Thank you.